Hello friends, welcome to my channel Tech IT Insights. Today I am going to cover up the whole syllabus of part 1. What are the main area concept will come the officially, which is TOGAF 10 editions. The concept, at few concepts I will discuss, and then if you see here the core concept wise concept introduction of the ADM and the ADM techniques, applying the ADM, architecture governance, the architecture content frameworks. So this is the overall the concept of the topics and syllabus guide for the TOGAF 10. I would tell you the main concepts. Already previous videos I already given the overview of the ADM techniques, ADM principles, how it works. If you see the introduction of ADM, 14 marks in this very heavy weightage in ADM, large unit, and ADM techniques, applying ADM. You can see the architecture governance, architecture content framework. Enterprise Continuum is very important concept to pass the TOGAF exam part 1. So definitions and the very important tools, how you are going to propose the classification mechanism. These are the main important syllabus you have to note down. So earlier already I given the TOGAF ADM phases and the all other topics. Today I'm going to cover the exam point of view, at the same time the concepts, how we can understand the main core concept. Today I will explain the TOGAF standards and the Enterprise Continuum architecture content framework. So let's start the first topic, very important of the TOGAF libraries, how overall the framework enterprise architecture point of view. You have to understand the main concept, the open group of library. So the TOGAF library, TOGAF standards, one is fundamental concept TOGAF. The TOGAF standard has two parts, one is fundamental core concept and another one is TOGAF series guide. So fundamental core concept will come like ADM techniques, apply ADM content, enterprise capability planning, how you are going to do the capability, core concepts, how the basic concept of understand these, it will cover in the fundamental concepts. And the series guide is a details plan how you are going to do. So let's see the main difference. I will tell you the main of the purpose and then the series guide and library. So if you see that completely purpose core framework fundamentals, when I come to the series, the practical how your usage, then in details we'll say like series guide. Now it's a fundamental concept. If it's a mandatory, yes. See, if you see the series guide is optional and recommended, so library is optional. Now for exam point of view, very high important fundamental concept, and the series guide is basic in details wise you want to go for that. Now coming to the topics, fundamental definition process and this applicable guide is series guide, a reference example. You need to understand the example of the architecture point of view, and then you can see the how your fundamental concept you need to understand. Let's back to the PPT, and then I will go for this is the open group of forum, very in detail concept. I have going to explain the how the series guide and fundamental guide, what are the core frameworks, how it is important in the exam point of view. It's very the fundamental concept. You have to understand the framework of the enterprise architecture point of view. See, it is a developing and sustaining of the enterprise framework, and to progress the how your many of the stakeholder and decision process to adopt the standard framework, we can the approach how you can use the standard regulator enterprise architecture point of view. This is the main important you need to understand here. The TOGAF standards are like define the and describe the how your cycle plan implementation governance changes, how your architecture point of view. It will talk about the TOGAF standards, and then you can see the defining the and describe the building blocks. Like when I will go through the in details how what is the building blocks, and then how it will understand that. These are the main core concepts. Now the TOGAF standards, there are 4 architecture domains. We can say there are some in interview point of view, or like if you are appearing the TOGAF examination point of view, there I will ask the architecture domain. So what are the domains? You can see the TOGAF standards. Okay, see TOGAF standards: business architecture, data architecture, application architecture, and technology architecture. It's primary 4 domains. We can say like a B dot. We can say short term as we can say B dot. Here data and application, if you come to the data application, is one phase which is phase C, information system architecture. It will combine with the data and application. But generally, if we talk about the different domain perspective, business architecture is B, and data and application will come to the C, and D will come as a technology architecture. If you go for the ADM principle, if you see the which I previous videos I already clearly explained that ADM are the 10 phases. In each phases how the diagram is represented, already I explained the previous videos, so you can go through that. Now coming to the architecture domains, see how this business strategies will works. It will like a business architecture strategies, how they are governance and the entire governance bodies, like an organization perspective, key business process will talk about the. So when they come to the data is like physical and logical. It's a combined with the organization assets. We can say data assets like a customer data management resources, how you are maintaining. Application is interfaces, how you are interact with their relationship with the different of business process organization. You talk about the how your business, their flow, interaction, relationships will the you talk about the application architecture. Now come to the technology, like how your infra, it will work like logical and software hardware system. Like you have a data center, you have physical and data applications like IoT services, social media, infra, cloud services. This all will come to the technology architecture point of view. This is the very core concept in the architecture domain principles. Okay. Now, what are the abstraction of the enterprise? So why the abstraction is techniques is the problem area, how you are defining that. So why, what, how the architecture needed. So this is the main 4 architecture abstract. One is contextual, conceptual, logical, and physical. So these are the very important 4 abstraction level. So how your contextual understand the enterprises architecture point of view, the scope of the work, how your goals and objective, this will talk about the context. And conceptual, this is understand the problem, the addressing the problem with focusing how architecture will realize, that is called as conceptual. Okay. Now logical concept. So logical, if you see the how identify the kind of business you model, like you have data, application, the technology, that are how you are implementing the structure, that will come as a logical. And physical, how you are going to identify the implementation part of it, determine the which physical component you are going to realization. They will ask entry question point of view. they will ask if you see this allocate and implementation physical component meet the identify the logical component. It's determine the which physical component and logical component can be realized. So that time they will give the option what is that contextual or conceptual and logical and physical. So in that case you need to give the answer is physical. So this is the very important when in exam foundation exam part 1 that they will ask this definition and they will give these options. And now coming to the enterprise continuum. This is very important. Enterprise continuum are very simply we can say how your organization will work, like generic to specific architecture, specific solutions to generic solution to specific solution to generic solution. So how your layer of the enterprise continuum will works in terms of in detail. We can see the architecture repository, also a very important concept in a heavy weightage in the exam point of view. They will ask they will show the diagram and how you are going to give this diagram, what is the represented, like either enterprise continuum or it is enterprise architecture repository, like that they will ask some questions also. So now we can see the basic what is the enterprise continuum. So it's provide a classification to two things. One is architecture continuum and solution continuum. Okay, now classify for the architecture solution we can say like both internal and external application repository. There are generic foundation architecture to organization. Simple way thinking enterprise continuum view is a repository of the architecture assets. We can say organization assets it contains the architecture description, models, building blocks, patterns, viewpoints, their artifacts, which is enterprise level IT standards. So there are two different possibles. One is enterprise continuum and solution continuum. As you can see that two concept where you are important. If you understand that architecture point of view, enterprise continuum provide a classify the assets and enterprise repositories. Now solution like a guide to support, guide to how it is interrelated to architecture and solution. So solution is talk about the implementation perspective, and architecture is talking about the how business describe and deliveries. That will be architecture continuum. So that will comes in the details. I will show you in that down level. So two generic ideas reuse the very especially in the enterprise continuum, solution continuum. So we can say generic to specific, and where we can see that. So okay, now most important organization here understand the architecture help being explain the generic concept to solution. These are the very important. Another important topic is architecture repository. This is very important. We can say architecture assets. Repositories are nothing but a large enterprises to Huggy value of created, very important in the enterprise point of view. If you see that in the diagram, you can say enterprise repository. Like you can see this diagram, they will ask architecture, TOGAF architecture repository. Very important. There are six architecture repositories. Like you want to see like architecture meta model, architecture landscape, reference library, standard library, governance repository, architecture capability, architecture requirement repository, and solution capability. Okay, in this phase very important which and all inside will comes. Okay, see when you come to the architecture meta model is a architecture methods. Okay, now it's a reference of architecture landscape. So landscape are three main strategic will follow. One is strategic architecture, segment architecture, and capability architecture. So strategy, how you are applying your project strategies. We will talk about the segment. Segment is nothing but it's a like department. It's a business unit that called as segment architecture. And the capability. The capability is talk about how your resource capability. We say like an architecture capability. We can say like people's capability. Different type of capability we call as architecture capability architecture. Now, and when it comes to the reference library or it will store in the organization reference materials. Like how you are adapt the how your existing reference documentation or design principle, like we can say like diagrams, those are reference libraries. Then are standard library are, as I told you, the B dot similar like business data application technology, how your business model will talk about the standard library. The another one is governance repository. This governance repository is very important, like stakeholder concern, complaints assessment, project portfolio, and capability assessment, performance. These are the very important. Now come to the architecture capability. Okay, skills repository, organization structure, and the architecture characteristic that we talk about the is managing with the architecture boards. Now it has standard library, external standards. Now coming to the reference model where organization perspective. Now if you see the solution landscape, solution building block, and if you see the architecture repository, strategic requirement, how you are defining that. So this is called as the TOGAF architecture repository. These are the major component with the architecture repository follow, like architecture meta model. As I given that, this is the very important in a exam point of each one as represented what is what, and they will ask where and all it will store. Like suppose they will ask templates, patterns, other forms, reference library can be leveraged, which guidelines, where it will store. That is called as reference library. Okay. Now they will ask the solution building blocks support to the architecture landscape within has been planned and are deployed into the enterprise. What is that? That is called as solution landscape present. So this is a very architecture repository. Okay, and then we'll see the another important concept called as content framework and enterprise meta model. See, the content framework and enterprise framework or meta model define the formal structure of provided guidance of the organization to implement their own architecture within the architecture tool. See, content framework define the categorization framework to use the structure of the architecture description to work packages, work product to express the architecture. Enterprise meta model define the types of entities that the relationship will define here. So it talks about the content framework and meta model similar how your ADM principles, like if you see that preliminary phase and the business strategies and the architecture definitions, will talk about the architecture definitions or will come to the this is the business architecture, information system architecture, like these are the technology architecture. 3 is comes here the architecture definition if you see the diagrams here. Now in the last architecture realization, so here if you see that opportunity solution where you will come to the phase E, if you see that opportunity solution and migration planning and work packages will happen capability, and if you see the implementation governance phase G, and then you can see the standard guidelines specification. So these are the, we can say, content framework, all are combined with the framework called as content framework is an enterprise meta model define a formal structure of guidelines of the organization. So that's why it's a content framework, enterprise continuum, and then architecture repositories are very important. Now coming to the another one is architecture capability. What it is differentiate? The capability, it talk about see how you are capable, right? The same way the skills and governance bodies, and then the architecture repository, the business operation, how you are going, the portfolio management, they talk about the business capability of architecture. Now here if you see the skills resource, now if you see the professional development skills or knowledge, and how your responsibility represent to the portfolio, to who is the what contract, project portfolio team, governance bodies, it talk about the how you are focusing direct to the who is assigning, who is required, who is impressed, that talk about the architecture capability. So here it comes to the architecture capability should establish a capability of following areas also: financial management, okay, performance management, okay, risk management level also you should follow, like risk, opportunity management, communication stakeholders, supply management, configure the management, environment management, that called as the enterprise capability. We can say like an architecture capability overview. Now the another very important concept called as enterprise architecture capability model. This is enterprise capability architecture capability model. Previous is TOGAF architecture capability model. So this is called as architecture capability model. Now when come to the enterprise capability model, shows like how you are generic to purpose and foundational capability. So generic, it comes like how your high level business strategies. Now come to the purpose capability. There are three importance. If you see this support strategy, architecture to support strategy, architecture to support portfolio, architecture to support project, architecture to solution delivery. So this is, you can say, enterprise architecture capability model. So three is very important when you come to the architecture enterprise capability: generic, business capability, purpose, and foundational fundamental capability. So fundamental capability as like governance and process integration, how we are defined here, we can see. Another important, gap analysis. The gap analysis techniques are in the ADM phases. Like we can see business gap analysis. There are two things which is very important when they're doing the gap analysis: architecture building block as business capability, where you are drawing the baseline to target. So it talk about the how your baseline architecture to the target architecture. It has baseline how your current state to future state. Okay, whereas ABB all about baseline target architecture, the baseline architecture point of view. So we can see like gap analysis two phases, like when it comes to the baseline architecture, target architecture. So what is the current state and what is the future state? What is there is a missing? That called as the identify the gap analysis, very important when it comes to the gap analysis concept. So here if you see the summarize this overall discussion, what we understand, like enterprise definition, TOGAF standards, and then we can see the abstraction. We have seen the enterprise continuum architecture principles, generic to architecture repository, we can see that. So if you, these are the very important main high level and main important topics in the TOGAF series. So here, when now coming back to the our syllabus, so we discuss about this main concept, enterprise reference framework, where you are here, and then we discussed a few topics here, enterprise continuum and tools. Okay, next part I am going to cover the different concepts which is similar here, only few topics I will take it next video. Please subscribe my channel. Thanks.